I'd like to welcome you to this meeting of Council. This meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the voices and images of those participating in the meeting and in the gallery may be captured as part of this recording. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pay our respects to elders past and present. As councillors, we have all taken an oath to carry out our duties in the best interests of the people of Indigo Shire and to do this in a fair and impartial manner. We are all committed to exercising the Council's powers and functions to the best of our skills and judgment. Do we have any apologies and leave of absence? Councillor Murdoch is an apology for this meeting. Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest? Yes. Councillor Shepherd, do you want to put your microphone on?
Yes, I need to declare an indirect interest by close association and a direct interest by financial interest under Section 77B of the Local Government Act in item 12.4, Environment Strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. We now move into open forum. We do have a question, and I believe you're going to read that out, Councillor Trennery.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is on behalf of Peter Watkins, from the Community Safety Officer from Sandy Creek and Charleroi Rural Fire Brigade. It's in regards to Sandy Creek Road, and I'd just like to ask Ian, if you could give us an update on the safety issues with Sandy Creek Road, please.
Are you going to do those, Councillor, or where's Peter?
That was the question. The only thing if Ian can update us on that. Okay. But I also got a letter that goes with it, and I'll table that in general business.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Peter. Thanks for your question. Look, I'll give a very brief general update right now, and then we'll take the bulk of your letter on notice, and we will provide a more detailed response, as we said earlier. Really briefly, we're aware that there's a community action group formed in Sandy Creek concerned with Sandy Creek Road and a number of elements about its condition, but also the isolation of that community. I guess my brief update is staff from within infrastructure have been in touch with different people from that community, and I know we've done some investigations of some elements. The issue of road safety has fed into our Traffic Liaison Committee, which is a committee that meets quarterly between Regional Roads Victoria, Police and Council, so there's certainly some issues that have been surfaced in there, and I know there was investigations about some of the more immediate maintenance type issues that we might be able to address, but I'm not sure where they've landed, so we'll follow up with you outside of here. Thank you.
Thank you. Condolences. Councillor Trennery.
Mr Mayor, I do have a condolence. So I'd like to move the condolence, but I'll just add to it if I can. This is in regards to Colin Campbell, who passed away. So Colin Campbell, OAM, and I'll just read out a little bit of what he's done, because he's done huge amounts. I'm going to take half of this meeting to go through it, but he was a committee member and vice chair of the Rutherglen Wine Festival Committee, which obviously put Rutherglen Wines on the map. A long-standing board member of North East Tourism, chairman of North East Wine Makers, led the formation of the Muskets of Rutherglen Network, Giriffe of Rutherglen Network. Colin was chair of the Fortified Sustainability Project, Small Winemakers Committee, and board member on Other Winemakers Federation. Campbell's is a founding member of the Australian First Families of Wine, a group of 12 families only, but which added up to 1,200 years of combined winemaking. Colin was a founding member of the Rutherglen Rotary Club, past president, and was named a Paul Harris Fellow, which is the highest level, highest honour that Rotary can put onto any individual. He received the Victorian Industry Association Distinguished Service Award. Colin was named the inaugural Victorian Legend of the Vine. Colin Campbell changed our taxation system in regards to wine. He changed federal policy. That was the type of man he was and the respect that he commanded in our community. He was a fantastic businessman. He was a community leader. He was a mentor to me and many others. He was a great man to all who knew him. Thank you.
I'd just like to add that Colin Bruce Campbell, OAM, was an icon, leader and legend of the wine industry, as you have appropriately put it, Councillor. He was also a hero for the community in Rutherglen. I was very proud to call Colin my friend. Would you like to move a motion of condolences that we write to the family under seal?
I'd like to move that motion of condolence.
Do we have a seconder? That's right, Councillor O'Connor. Is anybody against? Carried. Item 7, confirmation of the minutes of the previous meetings. The recommendation is that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 30th of April 2019 as published on the council's website be confirmed. Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor O'Connor. Is anybody against? Carried. Do we have any business arising from those previous minutes?
Sorry, I just point of ordered myself, Mayor, because I wasn't at the meeting, so I can't second it. Sorry.
You still can. You still can.
No, I can't.
I'm
'Cause I
sure
wasn't-
you read them in detail.
I read
watched
them,
it
but I
live
wasn't
stream.
there to compare them.
That's right, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Is anybody against? Carried. Do we have any business arising? Item 9, deputations and petitions. Item 10.1, the recommendation is the council accepts the monthly financial report as at 30 of April 2019. Somebody like to move that? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Trenery. Councillor Goldsworthy?
We're still on track and look like showing an improved financial position for the financial year. I'd actually be interested in hearing from the Director for Infrastructure as to how he feels we're going in relation to the infrastructure projects
Ian Ellett?
and completion rates.
Thanks, Councillor Goldsworthy. I think we've indicated in the report a projected end-of-year figure of around 81, 82%, I can't remember the number, at end of year, measured against the mid-year forecast. So as we close in on the end of year each month, we're giving a revised update on where we think the expenditure will finish. So it's probably favourable to previous years in terms of total spend, but against the mid-year forecast, which was perhaps a bit ambitious. Currently looking at about 81 or 82, I think the number's in the report.
Thanks. Yeah, so I think we're tracking along fairly well, and whilst a lot of it's committed, we still have $7.8 million in the bank, so we can pay our bills for this month.
That's right, Councillor Trenery?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was just, with 82%, obviously that's pretty good, since we've got so many ongoing projects that's going to go over to next year. But I'd like to ask at 82% where our cash position will end up. If I could find that figure out, please.
Greg Pinkerton?
Thank you for your question. I will need to take that on notice. I believe that that will still leave us with quite a healthy cash position. As you can see, we're tracking quite well with cash. But for the exact projection, I'll need to take that on notice, and I'll make sure that's published in Business Arising for next meeting agenda.
Thank you.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.2, the recommendation is the council adopts the attached procurement policy 2019. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor O'Connor, seconded by Councillor Trenery. Councillor O'Connor.
Sorry, it's not really a point of order. It was just I wasn't putting the microphone on, but it's an important. I think it's an important policy to go out to the public. So if the mover and the seconder could probably, I think you might know me as the second of the mayor. So if Councillor O'Connor wants to move that it goes out to public, I'm more than happy to second it.
Yep, I think that's wise. I think because of the requirements in terms of the timing for this policy that needs to be accepted or put through council, it will mean it's only going out for 2 weeks. So if people are interested in looking at this policy, please take the opportunity and get back to us within the next fortnight so that we can get it through in time for the statutory requirements to have this policy in place.
For the purpose of the minutes, could you just slowly say what the motion is?
The motion is that council releases the draft procurement policy for a 2-week period for consultation with the community.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak to that motion? Or
No,
do
no,
you
I
just
think,
have,
you know, as I said, it's
Councillor
important.
Chernery?
I think it's important to be released because there probably isn't a great understanding, which is normally our fault, that there's not a great understanding because we're not articulating it very well, exactly what responsibilities and where they lie. Councils have huge responsibilities when it comes to dollars and ratepayers' dollars, not just because it's other people's money, but there's also stipulation of what can and cannot be done, and I think there's not a great understanding, so I'd like people who have an interest in it to have a look and get back to us.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor O'Connor?
No, that's fine.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.3, the recommendation is the council accepts the attached assembly of councillor records. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Shepherd, seconded by Councillor Price. Councillor Shepherd? Councillor Price, does anybody else want to speak to this motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.4, the recommendation is the council notes the Kew Springs Water Extraction Facility Monitoring Report content and the action undertaken where required. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor O'Connor, seconded by Councillor Price. Councillor O'Connor?
No, it's fine. I don't need to comment.
So Councillor Price? Is anybody against the motion? Yes, Councillor Goldsworthy.
Either to the mover, seconder, or any of the staff, just what do we see the benefit of having this report come to council month in, month out with nothing on it? I just wonder whether it should be by exception.
You could move that motion, councillor, if you wish to do that, but it has been put to council in the past. Given the huge community interest in the water extraction and water mining issues in Stanley, this was at the request of the community, and it was felt that by continuing to monitor the activities of that company, that some of the issues that had been reported in the adjoining shire, in Alpine Shire, might be avoided. And it would seem that that has been the case. There's been very few issues along the way. We've looked at stopping doing this, but the community asked us again to continue, because there is a sense that by having this ongoing monitoring, it means that all parties, including the community, abide by the conditions set. So that's the reason, but I think it's quite reasonable if you felt that it was worth discussing further, that a motion be put to change that. But that's up to you, councillor.
Yep, sure.
Just wondering, do you know when the last time was that there was actually something worth discussing on that table?
I think the idea is that it's prevention rather than a cure, councillor.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.1, the recommendation is the council adopts the Youth Strategy 2019-2023, incorporating the changes arising from community consultation. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Price.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. So we've sent this strategy out for some feedback, of which we've received, and that's added to the 400 people that we've already consulted with. I think it's a very comprehensive strategy that we've got developed now, and the work plan is quite extensive and probably more than our youth officer can manage. But as it's listed in the report, that the strategy is ambitious and aspirational, and that's what we want for our youth, and that's what we want for our Shire. So I look forward to us adopting the strategy, Mr Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Shepherd.
It certainly is a huge workload, and one of the major priorities is mental health for youth, which kept coming up in the discussion. And I think the thing that we've brought up is that the action plan will the strategy acknowledges the need for the role to partner, facilitate, and advocate, focusing less on direct service provision casework. So we're going to have to be working with other providers to ensure that we get this youth strategy covered. And as you can see, there's a lot of those providers have given us feedback into this strategy. So there's a lot of ownership for this strategy. Look forward to it rolling out.
Councillor Goldsworthy.
It has a number of key focus areas, health and wellbeing being the first cab off the rank, activities, events and youth spaces, the second, employment and education training, the fourth one, to have a voice and to be celebrated, the fifth, to transport and housing, and the last, collaboration and resourcing. For me personally, I think the health and wellbeing is one that we have to really focus on. The first objective on there is to improve young people's access to mental health services. I think we have to be a champion in that space. We need all the services we can get. There's not enough help for our kids. And the last thing we want to do is see somebody hurt themselves because of lack of access. So I'm really happy with this strategy and commend it to all.
I certainly agree with the comments from Councillor Price, Shepherd and Goldsworthy 100%. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Yeah. So Councillor Shepherd.
Sorry, I just wanted to commend our youth officer that we have at the moment, Sal Kimber, who, if you follow on Facebook and on Instagram, the amazing things that are happening out with the youth now, she is really leading the engagement at the moment, and I think she's doing a fantastic job. And I just see the amount of young people involved and doing things at the skate park, doing the sound equipment training, all the ones that are doing the drive, L2P access, yeah. So she's really engaged. It's a big job she's doing.
Councillor Price.
Yeah, I was just going to say some similar words to Councillor Shepherd. I think that in the report here it says that the vision for Indigo Shire youth is Indigo Shire young people are empowered, resilient and connected. We support the community to help young people thrive, and I think that sums up how Sal works with our young people. I think that she makes them feel all of those things, and I think we're really lucky that not only does she work so well with our young people, she's really good at working strategically across the region and partnering with all of the organisations that we need her to. While she was undertaking this strategy with a consultant, she was also rolling out events, and very successful events at that. So we are very lucky to have her in that role, and also thank you to Carleen for her work as well. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.2, the recommendation is that Council adopts the Waggunya Railway Land Master Plan 2019. The Council acknowledges the contribution of the Waggunya Railway Land Development Committee to the development of the Master Plan. That Council notes the importance of continued liaison between Council and the Committee in relation to the implementation of the plan, including financial contributions and the ongoing maintenance of any projects. Would somebody like to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Price.
I just look forward to this plan being adopted. Mr Mayor, there's quite a workload there, and I think that the committee that's in place are the right people for that task. They've certainly put a lot of passion into the master plan to date. They've taken the consultation on themselves. They're certainly all very strong advocates for their community, and so I look forward to some of these priorities from the plan coming into fruition in the near future.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
I think this master plan is an interesting reflection on a community that absolutely decided they wanted a master plan for that area and have been really the leaders. We've been following behind them as they've pushed us and asked us for assistance in setting up this master plan. So they are very much in control of it, and hopefully we're going to be able to assist in some areas. But it's an amazing master plan. So I say congratulations to them for their work they've put in so far.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? So Councillor Price. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.1, the recommendation is, Councillor Goldsworthy.
Yeah.
Do you want to just do it slowly for the...
That council endorses as a draft climate change policy 2019 and places it on an exhibition for public comment for a period of 1 month. Something like that.
For
Sure
1
that
month?
do we need the second point?
No.
Yeah. Right.
Would somebody like to second? Seconded by Councillor O'Connor. Councillor Goldsworthy.
So I'll address the first part of the change initially. I just feel it's a really important policy for all the community to comment on. Some will think that we've gone too far and some will think that we haven't gone far enough. And I think it's very valid for this council to listen to the opinions, to assess them, and then adopt a policy that reflects what we believe is consensus opinion from the Indigo Shire community. We certainly do have to have a close look at it. You only have to, I think it was less than 2 weeks ago, it was the English Parliament passed a motion stating that there's a climate change emergency occurring. I think we can take a lead from some of that. We need to look at how climate change is affecting us, and we need to have an appropriate response to it. I believe this policy goes some way to doing that, and I'll be interested to see in the feedback that we get.
Councillor O'Connor.
I would endorse the comments of Councillor Goldsworthy and add that this policy has been drafted in conjunction with the Environment Advisory Committee of Indigo Shire, of which there are many very eminent members of our community on that committee. It's had their input. It's also, therefore, really important that we do get the views of the community on this. This issue is way beyond politics and personal opinion. We're at a point now where around the world there is a growing voice to say that we are facing climate emergencies. We as a local government have a responsibility and a duty of care to our community, but we need to also do that in partnership with our community. And so I think it is really important that this goes out for people to see that we are taking this matter seriously, that we are asking for their views on this as well before it comes back to council. And I would also like to thank the many, many people, and in particular our staff member Jill Croom, who have put huge amount of work and effort into dealing with something that is obviously way beyond just the remit of a small rural local government, but we all need to play our part, and this is our attempt to act with due diligence in this space. So we'd be very keen to hear what the community thinks of this effort.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? I was just going to make a comment. I can make it after you. No, you'd prefer if I do it? I can do it either way. As Councillor O'Connor said, a few people are surprised that it's become a local government and it's not part of the local government remit. The federal election, which has just gone, was climate change was a major thing. In fact, some people said that it was the major issue of that election. The federal government has committed to the Paris Agreement of 26% reduction in emissions by 2030. There's only 19 councils across Australia that have signed motion to declare a climate emergency, and there are over 500 councils in Australia. The word urgent was mentioned in last Saturday's Border Mail, and a lot of people ask whether it's an emergency situation. When you ring the Wodonga police station, the recording says, if the matter is urgent, hang up now and ring 000, which means it's an emergency. It'll be very interesting to see what the public comment will be.
And that's exactly the type of conversation we didn't want to welcome, Mr Mayor.
Can I clarify a statement that I made that you misquoted me on, please, Mayor? You said that I said that it was surprising that a local government would want to be engaged in this space. I didn't say that. I said we must all play our part at every level of government and at every level of the community, and for that matter, as individuals in the community, local government clearly has a role in this space. And I'd also like to clarify that nowhere in this does it talk about an emergency. That wasn't mentioned in this motion. It's simply saying that we have a climate change policy and that be put out for public comments. So I'm confused by your statements.
The policy talks about the requirement for urgent action. I just said urgent action. When you ring the police station, they tell you to hang up and ring 000, which is the emergency number. Okay, Councillor Shepherd.
I think sitting here, there's only one young person here in our council, but I think most of us middle ages know young people who were devastated with and are devastated with climate action in action. That's right, in Australia. And I think we need to show some leadership, especially to our young people who we are representing, even though we've only got one here. So I asked the young people of our community to check out our this strategy and give it their support and give us their support so that we know we are voting for their future.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Trennery.
Just briefly, because everyone's going on, I suppose, but I mean, I like when we put it out to the community. We don't debate it too much because we want community input in the direction they go. I just hope everyone's got open minds here in regards to what the community wants. It feels like there's a bit of closed-mindedness, and I think the most important thing about this is that whether you think pro, con or whatever, or there's parts of this policy that really excite you, parts that you don't like, that we accept the opinion of the community.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? I think we all have. Councillor Goldsworthy.
Look, I am keen to get public feedback on this. I would just ask that our feedback relates to climate change and not the weather.
Is there anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.2, the recommendation is the Council establishes an environmental upgrade finance program for businesses within the Shire, that Council appoints Sustainability Australia Fund to administer and support the delivery of the environmental upgrade finance for a trial period not to exceed 3 years. The Council delegates to the Chief Executive Officer the power to enter into an environmental upgrade agreement and declare and levy an environmental upgrade charge on any participating business. Would somebody like to move? Moved by Councillor O'Connor, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor O'Connor.
The purpose of this is that council plays the role of supporting businesses to upgrade, particularly in the energy saving space, to support their businesses, and that we do that by collecting their repayments through their rates notice. I've asked the Director of Corporate Services whether this would be a big burden on council, and was told that no, it would in fact be a very small amount of work. The reason that we can do it for this and not any other kind of loan, for example, if you want to buy a house or a car, you can't pay that off on your rates notice, is because there has been an exception made under the Local Government Act by the state government to allow this to happen. And in my understanding, this will actually support businesses, many of whom are wanting to improve their energy costs by putting in, for example, solar panels or renewable energy upgrades infrastructure and facility improvements that will save on energy. And our way of supporting that is simply to collect their repayments on their rate notice. So it's a small requirement from us, and it can have a big impact on some of those small businesses in our communities, and I believe there is interest in us doing this. So for that reason, I support it.
Could I just ask you a question on that, Councillor? The Sustainable Australia Fund, could you explain what sort of business that is?
Actually, no, I can't. I'm actually going on the recommendation that's been put forward to us, and wherein the questions that I asked was around why are we able to do this and not for any other private entity. I mean, I understand it's a business set up. And the answer I had was that there wasn't one single exception made under the Local Government Act in Victoria, and this was the exception made because this fund does not operate in the same way as other private mortgage businesses or banks. So for that reason, I don't understand the whole way that business is set up, but for that reason, it seems that the state government feels that it's a reasonable thing to allow local governments to do this. I think that we therefore can help our small businesses by doing this.
Is it a public company or a private company? Is it a for-profit company? Or is it a government agency?
It is a fund that allows businesses to access that fund, and our role in that is not to manage the fund in any way, but simply to allow people to repay that loan with their rates. And so for that reason, I don't actually really care how that fund is set up. It's immaterial. What's material is that people can access that fund, and we can help them to do that. In the same way as if you asked me how the National Bank of Australia was set up, I couldn't tell you.
No, I just asked you whether it was a private or public company. All right, Councillor Shepherd. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion?
I've got a few questions for the mover. On page 43, it's got it there, preventing capital leakage from communities. What's that? What do you mean? What do you think that means?
Can you...
Page 43,
yeah.
Preventing capital leakage from communities.
What do I think that means?
Yeah.
Pretty much what it says, that the capital remains in the community rather than going elsewhere.
So the fact that it's going to a company in Melbourne and not a local bank that doesn't employ anyone locally, our staff apparently will be doing all their work for them. So won't there be capital leakage out of our community?
I don't think that's capital leakage. My understanding is that this is a fund that the banks aren't offering. I mean, if the banks were offering it, great, but they're not. This has been set up. Well, if the banks are offering it.
It's a brokerage.
Yeah.
And they will use, I think at the moment, the ANZ Bank, think is the moment supporting this loan.
Yeah, but this fund is being set up specifically to allow small businesses to access it, to improve their energy costs, basically. And it's been set up with, if you like, the blessing of the state government. Now, that's different to any other mortgage broker. And so by doing that, I feel confident that the state government has actually made an exception under the Local Government Act to allow us to support businesses doing that. And for that reason, I'm prepared to support it.
Mr Mayor, I just asked a question. I didn't need, I got the answer. The banks, the small business, I guarantee you now, I work in that industry, they can borrow money off anyone. They can borrow money off local banks now that employ our young people that this will take away from. The risk to Indigo Shire, we say, oh, you know, it's fine, it's easy, it's a little bit of paperwork. If something goes wrong, it's not a little bit of paperwork. It's angst. There is risk to this council. It'll be on our letterhead. It'll be on our rates notice. Now, unless the situation's changed, Greg, our director, said that it won't be distinguished between our rates. So if there's a dispute over these funds, this ratepayer pays his or her rates up to date and on time, but has these funds incurred on it, he is still behind. There is no differential between rates and this fund. The risk to this council, if something goes wrong, if they say, listen, this fund's done the wrong thing by me, I'm not paying it, it still remains on rates as unpaid. I don't think there's a benefit to this community that outweighs the downside to it.
Okay, Councillor Goldsworthy.
Could I ask the relevant director for this area if they could spell out the risk to council in relation to this matter, please? Financial or otherwise?
It's in the report.
Through the Mayor, I look after the finance area, including the rates. So one of the reasons that this scheme was proposed, to my understanding, is that because it is collected through the rates, it's a charge on the property. And for that reason, that's why the fund is able to offer a competitive rate, because the risk to the stakeholders is quite low, including the fund. From the council perspective, there is a risk of any payment not being made. Where that happens, council goes through a very standard debt collection process, which begins with council and then goes through to debt collection. And through that process, if there's unpaid money, including this, we would pursue that. If that turns out to not be successful, if for some reason debt collection and the court action didn't result in payment, this would still remain as a charge on the property. And so at some point when the property is sold, council is quite high up in the list of debtors to be paid when a property is sold. So rates and those sorts of charges get paid almost first. So in summary, the risk to council, my advice is that the risk to council is quite low.
Just a follow-up question. So council will be becoming a debt collector for a private for-profit company. Is that right?
So council would add this onto the rates notice as a special charge. So the part of the Local Government Act that speaks to this is the part relating to special charge. So it becomes a charge from council, and it's a charge of council. And if somebody doesn't pay, we will go through the debt collection process. So we will pursue the debt, and I believe technically that debt is a council charge that is levied under the Local Government Act.
And the company is a private for-profit company?
Sorry, I've been concentrating on the rates perspective of this. I don't have the answer on the company structure of the fund, sorry.
I'll ask the CEO, but I feel fairly confident. CEO?
Otherwise the live stream won't work. Mr Mayor, there's actually more than one company involved here. What the Sustainable Australia Fund acts as a broker. And so their role is to be in between council and ultimately a finance provider. So they play a broker service. So the agreement ultimately would be between the business and the bank that lends the money. The state government provides this mechanism through the Local Government Act to provide businesses with access to cheaper finance because the whole process allows for repayments to be recovered through rates. So the Sustainable Australia Fund originally grew out of, I think it was the City of Melbourne, but as I understand, it later became privatised. So it is now no longer a government-based organisation, but is a private organisation. But the ultimate agreement is with the bank, with a bank. So that's also a private organisation. So both organisations are private.
But we just deal with that private company.
We would deal with the broker who handles all of the administrative arrangements. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Shepherd. Does anybody else wish to speak?
I just want a clarifying question about what the director said earlier. I was right in saying that if someone pays all their rates for their property and doesn't pay this, they could end up in court via Indigo Shire action. Is that right?
The short answer is yes. If you don't pay what's due on your rates bill, you could end up in court. The option of paying one part of your rates bill and not the other part of the rates bill is not open. We have fire service levy, rates, charges, various things on the rates bill. If you pay less than the full amount, then that payment is spread over all of the items on that rates bill, and so it's not possible to say, I'll pay this but I won't pay that on the rates bill.
So the private company that's for profit, if the charges that we're collecting on their behalf, if they're not paid, then that is the thing that we can take them to court for because it's on the rates bill.
Yes.
Councillor Goldsworthy.
I'd just like to speak to the motion. So looking at the website, the Sustainable Melbourne Fund was established by the City of Melbourne in 2002 as a revolving loan fund to invest in delivering triple bottom line outcomes. And it was recapitalised and scaled and was supported by the Bank of Australia to drive environmental upgrades at a national scale. As a result, the Sustainable Melbourne Fund was renamed. Their purpose is to be Australia's leading provider of environmental upgrade finance. They provide up to 100% of the capital needs by businesses wanting to upgrade their energy infrastructure and unlock efficiencies and environmental outcomes. We had the benefit of having one of their representatives speak with us in a briefing meeting. I'm confident that market forces will dictate where potential lenders from this fund will go for their funds, whether it be local or this fund itself. I think this goes towards council trying to support and achieve further efficiencies in relation to climate, and I support this motion.
Councillor Shepherd.
I asked the officer who presented the report to us on why we would do this, and they said that we've been approached by many businesses. Our council's been approached, asking for assistance, asking for grants, asking for advice on how they could have insulation renewables or waste minimisation or water saving projects, and this fund has come up as an obvious choice to offer. Now, I don't think there's going to be many businesses take it up, but the fact that we have it here for businesses to take up means that they have the opportunity to get longer loan terms, up to 15 years on a fixed rate, which increases cash flow into their business. They've got 100% of the finance is available, so they don't have to pay a deposit. There's no upfront capital required. It delivers savings on their utility bills because, of course, the things that they put in, whether it be solar, water, waste minimisation, water, will, of course, take their bills down and cover their costs, and can also overcome the split incentive barrier between owners and renters because they can share it with their renters. And also the EUF can be transferred to new owners So there are quite a few benefits. You said there were no benefits to small business, but I can see there are a number of benefits to small businesses. And of course, if it doesn't suit them, they won't take it up, surely. We're not forcing anybody to take any money here. We're just offering them an opportunity. It attracts investment and stimulates economic activity with private sector funding. So it's no financial risk to our council, as been discussed. It can strengthen the retention of business within our local area, and it provides an alternative to grants, which are often not available to fund such projects. So it just makes complete sense to me that we'd support this and let the businesses who've asked us to implement something like this to show us whether they think it's a good idea. And at the moment, it's set up just to be to have a 3-year trial period, just to see how it works for us. So I think 3-year trial period is probably not a bad idea.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. I'd asked questions. I didn't finish what I was saying, and the councillor was reserved her right, so she should be speaking. So I'm happy to say what I wanted to say, but then, you know, it's not fair on the councillor, that's all. I only asked a couple of questions. I didn't get my...
I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I just... So we talk about risk on this. Court case costs money. There is risk. There's risk that this could come back on our reputation if this doesn't work out well. There's opportunity now for every small business to participate in the banking sector and borrow money for these items. The banking sector is not this big giant that we're all meant to dislike. There's small banks all over the Indigo Shire that employ people.
Excuse me, can I just, point of order, I was given the right to speak last, and he's not asking questions, he's making a statement.
I realise that, and that was my error because I thought that everybody had a speak. I've just asked the CEO to check local law 3 so that you can continue, and then Councillor Shepherd can respond last.
I'm happy to.
So I was the mover of the motion. Yeah.
I realise that you've got right. Yeah. Oh yes, I wouldn't have forget.
Listen, I've said what I've had to say. So if I'm more than happy with Councillor Shepherd to counter anything or the mover to counter anything that I've said.
I just had a question for Councillor Shepherd. Did you say that renters can avail themselves of this? I didn't.
They can share, the owner can share the benefit with the renter. So if the renter might get have to pay less for their electricity if they're able to have solar. So they can share the cost.
You're saying the renter can...
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is that right, CEO?
I would not lie.
One of the differences, through the chair, one of the differences with this, to my understanding, is that a rates bill can be included in the term of outgoings. So when somebody rents a building, they may or may not be responsible for outgoings, depending on the lease agreement. And this fits into the definition of outgoings, and so that would then make it payable by the renter, whereas if an owner was to do a capital works upgrade to their building, that's not covered as outgoing, so they can't pass that on to the tenant.
Just to clarify, the local law says that the seconder can request to speak at a later time, not necessarily last. Anyway, Councillor O'Connor.
Good. Now that we've clarified that, as the mover, I would like to sum up by saying that I think there's been a good discussion about all the different ideas and concerns that might be raised. So thank you, councillors, for all of your input. I would like to also say that I accept the advice of our senior staff and directors. So while Councillor Trenery says there is a risk, Director Pinkerton said that that risk is very minimal. And so I think that we have a responsibility to support our small businesses. I've certainly heard every councillor at this table say that. Energy costs of business are a huge impost. Unlike banks, you don't need a deposit and you can pay this back over 15 years. We have an opportunity to support our small businesses simply by adding on this to their rates notice and collecting it as we do with all of their other rates and charges, which include a fire service levy, municipal waste charges, general charges. This is another charge that they can elect to put on, and we simply go through the process that's already in place. Therefore, I think that the imposition on local government is very small, and the opportunity for it may only be a handful of businesses, but nevertheless, we should be doing everything we can to support businesses to reduce their energy costs and of course, to improve our environmental outcomes. So for that reason, I put the motion.
I'll now put the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried.
Division.
Sorry, Councillor Shipp. All those in favour? Councillor O'Connor, Councillor Price, Councillor Goldsworthy, Councillor Shepherd. All those against? Councillor Trenery and Councillor Gaffney. Item 12.3, the recommendation is that Council endorses the Asset Management Strategy 2019, moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Price. Councillor Goldsworthy.
This is a first step in renewing what we do with our assets. I've been harping on about this for a number of years now. We have some asset management plans that are over 10 years old. I'm very happy to see this strategy come forward. The purpose of the strategy is to maintain the core level of asset management practice, implement selected advanced asset management practices where there have been net benefit to the sustainable management of Indigo Shire infrastructure assets, and ensuring that the planning for new and upgraded assets is driven by Council's strategic longer-term plans, service plans and asset management plans. And I think that speaks volumes. I am keen to see us try and do some of the advanced asset management components like employing predictive modelling, risk management and optimised decision-making techniques to ensure asset lifecycle treatment options and related long-term cash flow predictions. I'm hoping that we will get to an advanced stage, but at the moment I'm really happy just to see us reboot the process because it's been a long time coming.
Councillor Price.
I'd just add to that by saying that the importance of this strategy is reflected in the fact that it's a strong focus of the federal and state government, and in particular grant funding and other support is increasingly reliant on our ability to demonstrate high levels of organisational competency in asset management.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy.
It's obviously a fairly dry subject in comparison to the environmental upgrade finance. But it is equally important because if it's not for our assets, then we wouldn't be able to achieve hardly anything. And that includes sitting in the chairs in the building that we're in. So go forth and multiply.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.4, the Environment Strategy.
I just need to again declare that I have an indirect interest by close association and a direct interest by financial interest.
Thank you,
I will
Councillor
leave the
Shepherd.
room.
Item 12.4, the Environment Strategy. The recommendation is the Council endorses the attached draft Environmental Strategy 2019 and places it on exhibition for public comment for a period of 1 month. I think there's a part 2 to that. Would somebody like to move that?
Can do, yeah. So that's the recommendation. I'd like the motion to be the council endorses the attached draft environment strategy 2019 and place it and the action plan on exhibition for public comment for a period of 1 month.
Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor O'Connor. Councillor Trenery.
Obviously, the idea of that motion is to put it out to public. The environment is obviously controls everything and affects everything that we do. So I'll just recommend, I don't like debating it too much before it goes out, as I've said in the past, but everyone has vested interest in the environment, and I'd like to see everyone get involved and comment on it.
Just to quote really from the report, the Environment Advisory Committee was heavily involved in the development of this strategy, as well as working group meetings and out-of-session consultation. A broad range of staff and councillors were interviewed, and that's why it's really important now that the broader community has a look at this and has an opportunity to have input. And I think having that out at the same time as the climate change plan makes a lot of sense, actually, because people can read them together and see whether they are coherent, whether they feel that that's covered on the issues that may be of concern of them or has raised issues that may be of concern to them. And then I think them both coming back to council at the same time with people's input is actually a really good way to do this. And so I think I support Councillor Trenery's motion to get this out there and get comments.
Councillor Price.
Just to read from the report, Mr Mayor, just to show the strength of the new strategy, it's intended to be owned across all of council, not just by the Environment and Sustainability Unit. It reflects that a broad range of actions and decisions from council and staff have the potential to impact on the environment. To minimise environmental impacts of these decisions and maximise opportunities, it's intended that the new environment strategy shall be referred to and considered in all future applicable council briefings and reports. The new strategy sets a strong direction for Indigo Shire to operate in a manner that meets expectations of our community, to live in places that are clean with natural features and native flora and fauna. Furthermore, given a healthy environment is critical to tourism and agriculture, which are the main industries in Indigo Shire, investing in the environment makes good economic sense. And I just echo some of Councillor O'Connor's words, that we're so fortunate to have such a strong Environment Advisory Committee to be able to work alongside our staff in developing these strategies. They really dedicate a lot of time and effort and great strategic thinking to this process. So thank you to those members.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy.
And relieve me. What I would say is if you look at the implementation or the action plan, it is bold. So there is plenty of room for comment. Hopefully it'll be supportive. We are looking to be leaders in this. We do have a great environmental committee. Maybe they could start working at the federal level and get some action up there. But at the moment, I'm very supportive of what's written, and I'm looking forward to the feedback that we get from the community.
I've just got some questions about the implementation plan, the action plan. It doesn't bother me whether the mover answers it or the Director of Infrastructure Services. It talks about develop baseline inventory and emissions reduction plans and to a consultant to be appointed in 2019-2020, and that's in the budget. Is that a line item in the budget? In the draft budget?
Yeah, I believe that is in the draft budget at the moment, yep.
It then talks about electric vehicles in the council fleet and charging stations at both council offices. I don't remember reading anything about that in the draft budget. Is that a correct statement? Is that already in the draft budget?
Yes, look, the draft budget contains in the fleet replacement a provision for charging stations, but the replacement vehicles will be a procurement decision to be evaluated at the time. So the idea of electric vehicles is identified I can't remember if it sort of found its way into what level of documentation. Certainly when the budget was presented, we talked about the possibility of an electric vehicle coming into the fleet, but yeah, that'll be a procurement decision at the time.
The plan says that it's in the 2019-2020 budget. Another point, to replace lights in the Pines office with LED lights. Is that in the budget, 2019-2020?
Yeah, no, that's been completed recently in 2018-19.
It says to be completed by the end of 2019. It's already been done, has it?
Yep.
It says that it talks about power purchases from Indigo Power behind the meter, and it talks about that being in the 2019-2020 budget. Is that correct?
I think it's an investigation to look at those agreements. I don't think there's a light item in there particularly. We've got to purchase power, so how we purchase that is budgeted for.
So it's not decided that we'll purchase from Indigo Power? I'm just saying what's in the implementation plan. In the plan, it talks about the CFEUG program. Could you tell me what that is?
Yeah, that's the Community Facilities Energy Upgrade Program. So Council funded that for the first time this year, and that's in the draft budget again, where we allocate an amount of money for some of the community facilities who are faced with high energy costs to make application to get some funds to upgrade the buildings.
It then talks about the local government power purchase agreement that Indigo Shire large market site, the Pines, the building we're in, included in contract for a renewable power purchase agreement. Is that right, that they're going to do that out of this building? The council office?
I might take that one on notice. I suppose, can I remind councillors that the action plan is still a draft, and I suppose as is the strategy itself, and the strategy was always going to go at an exhibition, but we'd said in the report that this was actually a draft just presented as a visible thing, but I'm happy to take that one on notice, Mayor.
All right. It also talks about support Indigo Power solar farm proposal. Has that been decided?
No decision on that yet.
It also talks about incentives for conservation covenants on private land. Is that in the budget?
No, look, I haven't got the detail of that one.
You could take it on notice. It also talks about a weed review report.
Yeah, there's some money in the current budget, and there's an allocation in 1920 budget, in the 1920 draft budget for that.
So is that to be reviewed, is it?
Yes.
It also talks about a combat tool. What's a combat tool?
I'll take that on notice. A combat tool could be anything. I'm suspecting it's to do with weeds, but I haven't got the action plan in front of me to go through line by line. So,
it also talks about a revised investment attraction policy and strategy. Have we revised our investment attraction policy and strategy?
No, not at this time.
It also talks about, and I'm not sure at all what this means, Dish Pig reaches funding target and is commissioned to be built, and that it's in the budget. Could you tell me what that means?
The Dish Pig is I think something that Plastic-Wise Yak were looking to purchase, Plastic-Wise, I think, to help at community events to be able to do dishes and rely less on sort of throwaway and single-use plastics. So that was the driving force. So we've made committed to a contribution for that in the current budget.
So the Dish Pig reaches funding target and is commissioned to be built, and that's in the budget.
So what that means as an initiative is we had pledged a small contribution out of our current budget to make a contribution to that, but that would only come to fruition if they're able to reach their target and get enough funds to purchase. So as an outcome or an action target in the action plan is for that to come to fruition.
So is that with a private company?
No?
It's a community, the Dish Pig's a community facility?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Trenery.
Before I start, I've probably got one question. Is a lot of these questions come about because the pricing's not actually on here and you've obviously got access to it. So it'd be nice if when we're doing these sort of things that the pricing was there so we all knew what we're talking about, especially when the action list goes out. The summing up, I was going to speak similarly to Councillor Goldsworthy. I think one of the most important things, we stick a lot of strategies out there, which are fairly high level, but the actual real things that come out of it is the action list. There's some really good things in amongst this action list. There's things that should be probably questioned and certainly there's things that should have price tags on it so the community can see what it costs to do this. They might agree, they might disagree, it doesn't matter, but there should be openness enough to have that on there. But I think what this will do is allow people to see that council actually does something. It doesn't just write policies, it actually physically does something. So I'm glad the action list has gone out. I'd like to see it improve with some sort of costings on it if possible. But I obviously recommend the motion.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 13. You're not allowed to ask that. You've been sent out for a reason, councillor. Item 13.1, that council receives the attached unconfirmed advisory committee minutes and endorses the officer's comments. Would somebody like to move? Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Goldsworthy. Councillor Price.
I'd just like to highlight one of the meeting minutes that is attached from the Community Access Committee. We're really lucky with the makeup of that committee at the moment. We've got a really wide range of expertise and they're really having some great meetings. At this one in particular, they had a look at the youth strategy and we also asked David McIntosh, the assets inspector, to come and speak to the group, and it was good that they formed a dialogue going forward so that the Access Committee can feed directly into council through another staff member. We also spoke about the play parks plan, and one of the members was a strong advocate for an accessible playground, and we talked about the fact that we have a lot of special schools come out and use our playgrounds that are accessible in our quieter towns, and how we might look to that when we look to do a destination playground in one of our towns. So these are just some of the things that come up at our meetings, and I just thank that committee for their contribution.
Councillor Goldsworthy.
In the body of the report, you'll see there's a number of recommendations from the Economic Development and Tourism Advisory Committee. They do have implications for council, and in the fullness of time, you'll see some of them will come before council. It was a well-chaired meeting, an interesting one. We've looked at a number of things like the epic mountain bike track and the importance of getting the governance right on that. The terms of reference for the committee itself, there's been slight alterations with that, and you can see the officers' comments around that, and just the grant process for festivals and events, and also the report that we received in relation to the booking.com. So they're all important. The committee's certainly getting more out and providing, I suppose, more benefit to us as a group of councillors. So I'm happy to see that, and I would invite you to look at them in more depth, certainly when the reports come through.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? I've got a question just on that, and perhaps Councillor Goldsworthy would like to answer it regarding the Economic Development and Tourism Advisory Committee. It says that Council review and consider the report regarding ITAC Festival and Event Grant and the Tourism Events Budget. I just wondered when those grants were going to be considered, and I've certainly spoken to the CEO about the criteria for those grants. There's a number of people from a number of towns have asked why their applications weren't considered, and they were told that they didn't meet the criteria. I just wondered, CEO, if we could have a look at the criteria for the granting of those grants. So, Councillor Price, do you wish to sum up?
Just with us having had Volunteers Week, Mr Mayor, I'd just like to recognise that all of these people on our committees are volunteers, and we appreciate their time.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 15.1 is the Mayor's Diary. Any comments or questions? 16.1 is the Decisions Register. Any comments? Item 17, General Business. Councillor Price? Councillor Goldsworthy, Councillor Shepherd?
Just that we finished the Love Yak, Yak and Dander place making community engagement last week, and I think quite a few people got to speak, and for those that didn't, quite a few people filled out the survey, so we're looking forward to seeing what comes back from the consultant. But basically, they were just pretty impressed with Yak and Dander, so I hope they can find some things to improve.
Councillor Trenery?
Mr Mayor, I'd like to table a letter from that I spoke about at the start of the meeting from the Sandy Creek and Charleroi Rural Fire Brigade for Ian, the Director, to reply to Peter Watkins, please.
Thank you. Councillor Price?
Just to thank the staff that have been involved with the Chiltern Netball Courts project. They were opened on Friday by Jacqueline Symes, and it was a great turnout to that event. Some people have said that they would have liked it to have been on a Saturday, but we were accommodating the minister, so thanks to those that were able to turn out on the Friday morning. The Director, Mark Florence, said that it was a great partnership between council, community, state government, and in particular, Brian and Graham Cassidy from the Committee of Management of the Reserve. So we'd just like to again say thank you to those community members who put in 400 hours of project management at a cost that we estimate to be $80,000. And thank you also to the staff that worked so closely with them, Adam, Flynn, Carleen, Lamana, and anyone else that I might have forgot to mention. But it was a great opening, Mr Mayor, and they'll be well used into the future. And it came in on budget.
I declare the meeting closed.